Good morning, everybody. Many of you have already been on for our first two sessions. We got a very early start today before 8 a.m. I am one cup of coffee in. I'm hoping to get a second here once Taylor starts. Um, so I want to welcome, I don't want to waste too much time. McGuire Sponsel is also obviously a COCPA preferred partner. They joined us about a year ago. They actually have offices here in Denver, as well as across the country. I met Taylor at Engage actually a year ago in July in Las Vegas. We both enjoy playing golf, and so that's all we talk about. We never talk business. But so if you need to play golf, Taylor's also your guy. But anyway, we won't talk about that right now. We will talk about McGuire Sponsel, again, a tax and advisory partnership. I'm going to let you introduce yourself, Taylor, and just run with things. And here we go. Thanks.
Perfect. Thank you, Daryl. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for taking the time out of your busy day to attend this session. I know as the tax deadlines are approaching, you guys are extremely busy people, so we really appreciate the time. I also want to send a big shout out to Daryl and the rest of the Colorado Society of CPAs for their partnership and allowing us to be part of the partner demo day today. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Taylor Leonard. I'm a relationship manager at McGuire Sponsel. I'm located in our Phoenix, Arizona office. McGuire Sponsel is a national specialty tax consulting firm that partners directly with CPA firms across the country to assist them and their clients with specialty tax needs. Now, I know you as CPAs have sat through dozens and dozens of these specialty tax presentations before, and my goal is to be a little bit different today. One of my main goals is to not bore you to sleep. So I'm sure a lot of you know what our specialty tax tools are, such as cost segregation and R&D. So I'm more so going to talk about our process and what can differentiate ourselves from a current provider you're using or a previous provider that you've used in the past. So again, we're a national specialty tax consulting firm. We're comprised of 4 different practice lines: fixed asset services, R&D tax credit services, global business services, and location advisory services. This next slide further breaks down each of our practice lines. I'll just touch on a couple here. For fixed asset services, this is our biggest service line. Due to cost segregation, we do about 2,000 cost seg studies per year. And then 179D and 45L, a couple different energy deductions and credits. I do not have any slides on these, so if you have any questions on that, I'd be happy to set up a call for after the presentation, or feel free to ask questions as we go throughout. Our newest addition to this practice line would be property tax services. We launched this in about October of last year, and this has been a great addition to our firm, as there's a ton of overstatement of real estate across the country, and has been a great addition to our CPA firms. The R&D tax credit services, this is our second biggest practice line. Last year, we did about 800 R&D tax credit studies, and this is on the state and federal level. And then something that's not listed here is probably what I would assume is the biggest headache for all CPAs across the country. This is my experience from meeting with all of my relationships, is Section 174 amortization. We decided to invest in that, and we are now offering to do the Section 174 amortization calculation for any current 41 clients, as well as any clients that are getting the 41 done elsewhere. We are able to do the Section 174 calculation. Our third practice line is global business services. This is our fastest growing service line. There's been a huge uptick in transfer pricing studies and international compliance requests from our CPA firms. And this has been due to the IRS really cracking down on the international space. We also are able to assist with global expansion, global structuring, and IC DISC. And then our fourth practice line is location advisory services. This is for any growing, moving, expanding companies. Our team is able to come in and identify, negotiate, and maximize state and local credits and incentives on the client's behalf. So McGuire Sponsel's motto is relationships above all. We truly are dedicated to being the trusted, chosen, and technical team to you, your firm, and firms across the nation. To date, our trusted approach has allowed us to partner with over 500 CPA firms in all 50 states and has allowed us to expand to 5 different offices internally. We have about 100 employees in total. Our offices are located in Indianapolis, Indiana, which is our headquarters, Detroit, Michigan, Atlanta, Georgia, Dallas, Texas, and Phoenix, Arizona, where I'm located. We opened the Phoenix office in June of last year, and the goal or the mindset behind the 5 different regional offices is to better serve our CPA firms across the country. Easier access to meeting with our CPA firms. So getting into the fixed asset services. This is for clients with a large number of fixed assets. They're able to benefit from a variety of studies, cost segregation, 179D, 45L, and property tax appeals. For those that might not know what a cost seg study is, it reclassifies assets from the normal 27.5 or 39-year life and accelerates them and moves them into different buckets, such as the 5-year, 7-year, and 15-year class life. This results in a substantial cash flow within the first 5 years. When it makes sense to do a cost seg study is when a building is purchased or constructed over $750,000, or if there are renovations in excess of $200,000. Now, these numbers can change, especially with bonus depreciation, quote unquote, phasing out. But we as a firm believe that it'll go back up with the law changes coming up here after the election. But nonetheless, these are the numbers that we advise on. Now, a little bit about our process with the cost seg study. So if you have a client specifically that has a building over $750,000, it'd be a good time to make the introduction to us. What we would do is we would initially set up a phone call and learn a little bit more about the client's property and about their business model. We are not in the business to just sell cost seg studies. We want to make sure that your client is able to utilize the cost segregation study. So that's the reason for the call, and that's the reason for having the CPA, or you as the CPA, looped in as well. You are the ones that ultimately are able to know their tax liability. So during that call, after the call, actually, we would then do an information request. Depending on when the building was placed in service, we would ask for either a depreciation schedule and a settlement statement. An appraisal always helps. We always throw that in there. And then our team will turn around a proposal within 48 hours. After that, you and your client are able to make a business decision on if it makes sense to do a cost seg study. On that proposal, it'll also have our flat fee to do the study. Please note that we are a conservative firm by nature. So 9.9 times out of 10, we are going to exceed those projection proposal numbers. And from there, it'll take, from the signed engagement letter date, it'll take about 4 to 6 weeks to turn around a full cost seg report. In that time frame, we will do a site visit where one of our 30 cost seg engineers will go on site and take pictures and measurements of certain assets that they're able to accelerate into those 5, 7, and 15-year buckets. The next slide is about property tax. Again, this started in October of last year. We brought in a gentleman named Ken Zrock. He has about 25 to 30 years of experience of doing property tax appeals in all 50 states. We are able to do property tax appeals on real and personal property. And we're also very selective on who we pursue, because this is one of our services that we are charging strictly on a success base. To date, we are averaging about 10 to 15% average reduction in taxes paid for clients that have signed up with McGuire Sponsel to do a property tax appeal. Typically, the number that we advise on here is if a client is paying over $50,000 in property tax, that's when it makes sense to make an introduction. This process is definitely our least intrusive process. I would say most of the time, all we need to determine if it's a good opportunity or not is if all we need is an address. So again, very, very non-intrusive, non-invasive process, pretty simple, and we can usually get that back between 2 and 3 business days on if it makes sense to be a good opportunity. Here's a case study on a recent property tax appeal that we did. This was brought to us by a CPA firm. The client had a hotel in Montana, and they were paying well over $50,000 in property tax. The hotel is, I mean, as you can see, it's historic, it's beautiful. But the hotel, even though with the recent expansion and facelifts that it went under, it was still underperforming. And we were able to save the client $56,000 in annual tax savings. The next practice line is the research and development tax credit. This has been around on and off, I would say, for 40 plus years. It rewards companies for investments in developing new or improved products or processes. When does it make sense to claim the credit? Usually the R&D tax credit studies are conducted when a taxpayer incurs QREs in excess of a specific threshold during a tax year. However, we can advise and assist clients with any level of R&D spend to ensure they are properly qualifying the activities and quantifying the expenses. QREs are the biggest part of the R&D study, and what is included in QREs would be the wages, which is the biggest driver of the credit, your research supplies, your cloud computing costs, and your contractor costs. Now, who can benefit? So, this kind of leads into our process again. We would have an initial intro call if you have a client that is subcontracting engineering or testing functions, if you have clients that build prototypes, jigs, dies, or models to test or evaluate, or if a client is incurring raw material costs during the product development or improvement processes. This is when to introduce us to a client. We would have an introduction call, and we would find out more about the company and more about their certain projects that they're doing to further qualify them for the R&D tax credit. And on the right-hand side of the screen is the IRS's 4-part test. During that call, we will make sure that your client's projects are meeting all 4 parts of these tests. So if they're only doing 3 out of the 4, unfortunately, they will not qualify for the R&D credit. And that's what our experts and engineers on staff will do during this call. After the call, we would do another information request. We would get tax returns. We would get P&L statements, just kind of depending on the situation. And our team will then process and come up with projections. During the projection phase, it'll also have a fee. Now, our fees are time and material not to exceed the fee listed. So again, we're a conservative firm. When we go into the study and the report and we do field work, 9 times out of 10, we're going to find more credit for your client. Our fee does not change during that process. It is not a contingency fee. There's nothing like that. It is a flat fee not to exceed the price listed. And then from there, it takes about 1 to 2 months to conduct field work and deliver the completed R&D tax credit report. The next practice line is global business services. Again, like I mentioned, this is our fastest growing practice line. This was actually started by listening to our CPA firms. We work with a firm that's in the top 30 that we do all of their cost seg and R&D tax credit reports. And they came to us and said, hey, we're really struggling with international tax. Is there anything that you guys can do to help us? So we invested in international practice. And it started as more of consulting work, but as you can see on the screen, it has really grown into other needs that our CPA firms needed. Global expansion, global structuring. But the big 2 that I really want to talk about is the transfer pricing and the compliance. Transfer pricing, like I mentioned earlier, there's a ton of IRS scrutiny on this right now. It's more of a shield. This is not submitted with your tax returns. It is if your client gets if your client gets selected for audit, they will ask for a transfer pricing study. if they have one in place, and they'll give you 30 days to present this transfer pricing study. So again, it's just further backup for your client to stay compliant. And then the compliance portion of this, we are able to we can make this seamless as possible. We have many firms that we actually get access to the CPA firm's tax software, and we can go in there and turnkey do all of the tax or 5471s, 5472s, etc. And we'll fill out all these forms. Obviously, we are not able to sign them, but we will leave them completely filled out for you to technically review and ultimately sign and submit. This next slide this is when it kind of makes sense to introduce us to your clients. Again, we're pretty big on having phone calls with clients to further understand the scope of our projects. We would introduce a member of our GBS team on that call. But if your clients have operations, facilities, or businesses activities abroad, if they're selling product abroad, if your client is supposed to be filing forms 5471, 5472, 8865s, or 926s, that's another great time to introduce. Or if they're behind on compliance filing. I know this can be a hard conversation for a current client, but we are able to help navigate those calls as well. But it's also a good time if you're trying to onboard or win over a client. It's a good time to bring it up because that shows that their previous CPA was not having them remain compliant in the international world. Transfer pricing studies. I would say generally when a CPA identifies transfer pricing issues, clients shy away from completing a formal study based on the preconceived notions that a study is expensive, time-consuming, it's only for large multinational corporations, and it's a 100+ page deliverable. Transfer pricing studies do not need to be costly and time-consuming. In fact, the IRS gives guidance in section 6662, providing a table of contents identifying requirements for a transfer pricing study. Our common sense approach to transfer pricing is it's a trusted and tailored to your business. It's logical and efficient. It reduces exposure in the event of an audit. And generally, on average, we produce about a 15 to 25 page deliverable. If a client has completed a transfer pricing study in the past and it is time to update, the transition to McGuire Sponsel can be seamless. If a client has never obtained a transfer pricing study and needs guidance to understand the whys, our team is here to assist. And I'd be happy to set up a call with the leader of our global business practice, Jason Rao. Our fourth practice line is location advisory services. Again, this is for your growing, expanding, relocating clients. We are able to help with strategic growth planning, site selection services, credits and incentives consulting, and incentive compliance services. Now, this has been, since the rollout of this practice line for us, this has been the hardest practice line for CPAs to fully grasp and understand. And it's not necessarily your fault as a CPA. I think you can all agree with me that a lot of the times your clients, you are finding out after the fact that they buy a building, after the fact that they're adding jobs. And again, this is the negotiation is the biggest part of this practice. So when you're coming up on if you're finishing up 23, if you have any tax planning meetings or coming up on 2024, if you're sitting down with your clients and they mention that they're relocating, expanding, making capital investments or adding new jobs, and even training new employees, that would be a good time to loop us in. Ben Worrell leads up this practice line for us. He actually sat on the on the government side and has decided to join the quote unquote good side with us. So he understands the ins and outs of the government and the state and local municipalities. Some key things to listen for is if they're adding 25+ jobs over 5 years, it does not have to all be in the first year. Again, this is sometimes a long-term play, depending on the state. If your client is buying, leasing, expanding, or building a facility, if they're purchasing $3 million in new equipment, this is typically, we see this in the manufacturing space. Manufacturing clients are huge, that really, really can benefit from these credits and incentives nationwide. Another key piece of this is if they're acquiring or merging another business in. A lot of states will recognize those as net new jobs. So again, before the fact that the merger or the acquisition happens, that is key. If they're relocating operations, and again, like I mentioned, training employees. Here's a case study as well from our location advisory practice. It was an aviation maintenance company. They had an expansion of $5.9 million with a goal of creating 23 net new jobs. And our team was able to work alongside them throughout this entire process and secure $315,000 in credits for this specific client. A big thing about this practice line as well is the compliance and reporting piece. Our team will stay with the client throughout the process to ensure that your client pulls down on the maximum amount of credits and incentives that are offered to them in the initial phase before expansion. Here on this next slide, it talks about the different industries that we serve. As you can see, fixed asset services, everything is checked. But there really isn't a industry that we have not worked with in the past. I can say, for example, I'm currently working with a client that is an auto dealership that we are working with internationally. So again, this is just the most common for us. So if you have any questions or have any clients within these industries, please do not hesitate to reach out. With that being said, I want to thank you again all for your time. My email, my office number, and cell phone are all listed below. I'd be happy to schedule a call to further discuss. And again, wish you all the best of luck with the 9/15 and 10/15 deadlines. And I plan to be in Colorado here after the deadline. So it'd be great to grab coffee or lunch, happy hour, whatever you guys are into. And thank you again.